Okay, I'll get started here today with our big exam review. I got a lot of ground to cover, so I'm going to try to move quickly. Let's see here. Next time, Monday, September 30th, we'll have our first exam. So to be clear, I know a couple of people have asked if you can do either or. The answer is no. Both in-class component and online component. My plan is to do the in-class component, have the online component open Monday, right? All starting at class time, go all the way through to Monday and then through Tuesday, maybe into the wee hours. If you want to do it at 12 o'clock a.m. Tuesday night, I'm not going to be able to grade it until Wednesday, where I have to cut everything off because I need to grade everything and all of that. My plan is to get everything graded and back to you by Thursday. I know Thursday's a holiday, but still I feel like it's good form to do those things quickly. And then, of course, you have a couple days after the exam, the 30th, I should say, to do, dot the I's and cross the T's on any homework that's due. So once you start the online portion of the exam, this was something that, one of the great things about the practice exam is a couple people kind of ran into a problem here. Once you start it, you have 90 minutes to finish it, right? So it's not like, you can look at a question, and then log off, and then do the question, then log back on, so on and so forth. 90 minutes once you start the online portion. The clock starts running, and it'll run once you've started it, until the end of that time. So you can't open and close and stop the clock. The idea is to at least, you should have, maybe most of you saw from the practice exam, you should have ample amount of time to do it, but the idea is to at least make it look a little bit like an exam where you have to produce the answers as the questions come. So if you don't know where it is, you should see it. And it looks like, by the way, we had pretty good participation in the practice exam. But it should be exactly where the practice exam was on Top Hat. One other thing, I don't know if I mentioned it here. Grade scope. So it occurred to me, so one of the things that happens when we go through this dress rehearsal, I'll say this in a second, or you'll hear me say it throughout the class, I learn as much, if not more, than you do about the whole process. One thing about grade scope, it turned out that a lot of you never got an email that I signed you up for grade scope because you already had an account, right? So if that's the case, I think most of us who had this problem, or most of you who had this problem, we figured it out. But if that is the case, please just try to log in and see if you're already there, right? And that might resolve the problem. But it was good that we were able to iron out a lot of that stuff. So it looks like, as I said, this practice exam process is a big help for me, to sort of know what kind of questions to avoid. More than a few questions had kind of weird answers, ambiguous answers that people pointed out to me. Some were a little difficult. There's that total benefit question. That one kind of pops into mind. It looked like some people haven't, when they had questions about things, they didn't go back and sort of look at the lecture notes or the lectures. So I want to encourage you to do that if there's certain topics that you didn't quite get. Someone also mentioned that if you happen to go back and look at it, throw in the comments section, say, Baker talks about this at this period in time, right? Or at this point in time. That would be helpful for others trying to follow along or trying to find the same thing. Because usually if you haven't gotten something, there's, think about it that way, there's several other people in exactly the same situation as yourself. So, right, and it looked like we didn't have a huge number of computer glitches, problems like that. But once again, I'm hoping you figured out where you want to do this exam and things of that nature. So just in terms of the content, we had 7 lectures, right, through last time. There are 8 chapters to read, right? This should all be clear from the course matrix. And we have these 5 problem sets. And the basic categories, we had opportunity costs and the PPF. We had supply and demand stuff, shifting around curves, thinking about comparative statics of equilibrium. And then we had what we did last time, which was, parlaying consumer and producer surplus into an understanding as to the benefits or costs from taxes, floors, and ceilings, things like that. And that's really the whole of the content here. So my plan is to just basically do all the problems, right, that were on both practice exams. And I don't see why we should delay any further. We'll get that project started. So this was the in-class component. Some people asked if it was shorter than the actual exam or what I'm going to give you on a Monday. The answer is no. Exactly the same length, right? I didn't give you half of the exam. It was just a one-pager, both sides, right? And that was it. One other thing about the, if you did happen to do this on Gradescope and, you tried to upload it or something, I apologize, but I did have to, give the TA time to actually grade it yesterday. So I cut it off at 3 p.m. If you didn't get it done by then, by the way, no big deal. It's, you can still self-grade. You can still compare what you had to this. It's fine, right? None of these practice materials count for a grade. They are strictly to get you ready for the exam on Monday. Is there a question?
You kind of answered it, but I have like more of a
Oh, okay.
I'll talk to you after class.
Fair enough. Okay. All right. So here we have the rental price of housing in the local area. Yesterday, by the way, we had a very interesting seminar on how rental housing, long-term rental housing, interacts with Airbnb, and what happens when you crack down on Airbnb to the rental housing markets. It's pretty interesting stuff. Anyways, so let me just kind of copy this over because we're going to need it for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here. The way I drew this out, let's see. Some pretty cheap rental housing. Let's try and make sure I get this to look approximately correct. So this is 200, and then we have a 305. And the rent ceiling is 150, so I'm almost done here. We need what happens there, draw on the graph. What happens here, quantity demanded, supplied, and deadweight loss. Okay. Okay, so first order of business is just showing the ceiling, and I know it's not exactly the same as my graph that I had on my diagram, but I asked you to draw in a rent ceiling of $150. So here you can see the equilibrium price in the market is 200, right? So the ceiling, as any decent rent ceiling or price ceiling should be, is below the equilibrium, right? So the idea would be that what I had in mind was that you would draw a vertical line on that diagram, like this, right? And then you would sort of, you could indicate these things because they might help you later. But I believe this number was 400, and this is 500, and this is 300. Hopefully I have that right. So, right off the bat, you can see here that at this ceiling of 150, we have demand of 500 and supply of 300. So the question 2 there, question 1, by the way, was draw on the graph. A good tip I learned from a student many years ago is to take out your ID or something if you need a straight edge on the exam, because you will have to draw a couple things on these diagrams. Anyway, so we wind up with the shortage. That would be the answer to question 2. And maybe I can just pull it up here for a second. Right? I would want you to circle this part here, shortage. At the ceiling, we see that quantity demanded is 500. Quantity supplied is 300. And now here's the hardest part. That's more or less fairly basic stuff. The deadweight loss due to the ceiling. Now I kind of regret that I didn't say a little bit more about this because we spent a little bit of time talking about how you could, rent dissipation, I could say, or surplus dissipation, right? And we had these rationing problems associated with these circumstances, but when I say deadweight loss, and hopefully you understand that it's the deadweight loss triangle, I might have said, what is the deadweight loss under the best possible case, right? The best case scenario from the perspective of society. And that would be just this triangle here. And so what I'm going to do is spend a little bit of time figuring this out in various other ways, so we'll get a little bit more out of the problem than just the question there. Okay, so two ways to do the deadweight loss. One is the direct method, I guess you could say, and the other is the comprehensive method. I'll do the comprehensive method, and this kind of will remind you of a couple of things about the the rent ceiling as well. So if we just sort of imagine our market running up to this point, hitting the supply and then stopping there, well, mechanically we could do this area here as consumer surplus, right? And this area down here as producer surplus. And then what we could do is compare it to what the surplus would have been without the rent ceiling, right? Which would be all of these, the two triangles here. So maybe I should do that first. So prior to the ceiling, we would say consumer surplus was 400 minus 200 times 400 divided by 2, right? So this is 200 times 400 divided by 2, which is that 8,000? No, it's 4,000, right? Because we'll get 400 times 100. Wait, 40,000. Thank you. You can correct me. It's all right. I have trouble with zeros and multiplying, so this is beforehand. Producer surplus, well, we get 200 times 400 divided by 2 is again 40,000, right? Same exact calculation. So we could say total societal welfare is 80,000, right? That's the benchmark where we start. Now we can go to the picture that I've done here, and we can see that in the best case scenario, right, is we would have this all going to consumers, right, and this going to producers. So let's see, I'll do the consumers first. The way we like to do this is to sum the areas of triangles and rectangles. So let's see, we have a triangle up here. 400 to 250 is 150 times 300 divided by 2. That is 150 times 150. Guess I could do it that way. Focus this a little bit. Give myself a headache. Okay. 150 times 22,500. Seems sensible, right? That's this triangle up top. Well, we have to add to it this rectangle, which is, you can see, has a height of 100. That's the distance from 150 to 250. And it has a base of 300. So that is 300 times 100. That's 30,000. This is 100 times 300. And so we can add these together, and we see that we have 52,500 for total consumer surplus, right, after doing this out. Yeah, by the way, if you wanted to grab an extra copy, it turns out there were some of the in-class component laying here. You can come and grab one. So, okay, this is the best case scenario consumer surplus, yes?
I'm still kind of having trouble with this, so I just want to make sure I get it straight. So we got the consumer surplus by multiplying the quantity of the y-axis plus quantity of the equilibrium for...
Okay, I would say it a little bit differently. Yeah, I would say that what we're trying to do, I guess ultimately what we're trying to do is get the area below demand, yet above the price that consumers pay, up to the market quantity. Now, the mechanics of this involve computing this whole area, right? Which I am doing by computing first the area of this triangle, and then the area of this rectangle. So this is the triangle, this is the rectangle.
So
I add those together, and that gives me the whole area.
Okay, so you get 400 times.
No, I don't want to use 400. I want to use this area here as the triangle.
Okay.
The triangle goes from 250 to 400, right?
Oh, okay.
So that's 150. That's where I get this 150 here.
Okay, and then you get 300
from the length of the base.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
Okay. I'm getting that.
All right, good. So that's consumer surplus. Producer surplus is just a triangle with this is 150 here, this distance. This is 300. So we do this, 150 times 300 divided by 2. Well, that gives us 2250, or 22,500 again. And then we can add up these two numbers to get total surplus. 0, 0, 1, 5. Is that right? I feel like I did something wrong there. I did. It should be 75,000, right? Yeah, that's right. So we get total surplus of 75,000. Previously, it was 80,000, right? So that would suggest that the difference between the two shapes we've been talking about, well, it's this here, right? That would mean the deadweight loss is 5,000, right? And I kind of snuck a little bit of a more expansive review in there to remind you what producer surplus and consumer surplus look like, but also to show you that you can use them to calculate the surplus. So one other thing I will mention is that you can see once again that our rent ceiling accomplishes this objective of shifting surplus from producers to consumers. The consumers, for example, had 40,000 in surplus before the rent ceiling, but now have 52,500. So that has happened, while at the same time, producer surplus has fallen from 40,000 to 30,000. There was a question there, yes?
I did it a different way, but I don't remember why I did it differently.
Oh, did you get the right answer?
Yeah.
Okay, well, can I just jump right in and say there is another way to do it, right? The other way to do it is to forget about all these shenanigans, right, that Baker did there, and just go right for it and calculate the area of this triangle, right? You see that it has if you want to look at it from the side here, it has a base of 100. It has a height of 100, right? 300 to 400 here. So we could just calculate the area directly by, what happened to my good marker here? By doing 100 times 100 divided by 2, which is also 5,000, right? So you get the same answer there. Of course, I did it the long way, the comprehensive way, as I called it first, because I wanted to sneak some more stuff into the review. Yes?
I don't know why I did it this way. I did half times 200 times 50.
1/2 times 200 times 50.
Why is it 1?
I'm not sure why. I can't. It's hard to sort of think about why your numbers came out in a particular way. But suffice it to say, this is how I would do do the problem there. Yeah.
So, stupid question. Why is the upper triangle is consumer surplus? If as we go up, I believe people pay more for the same quantity.
No, right. Okay, so you're saying why is this upper triangle surplus? Remember where the basic.
Why is it consumers not
consumer surplus. Yeah. Well, remember what happens in a market. The rent ceiling is no different than any other market. There's one price, right? The market price here happens to be 150. Everybody pays that, regardless of their valuation, right? That, which is, in fact, you've reminded me, that is the genesis of this whole idea of consumer surplus. We all pay the same price in a market. Some of us really value the product, others more than ever. And that's where this consumer surplus comes from. So I like that. We kind of touched upon various calculations here and also the overarching principle. Yeah?
I think I was guessing 200
Okay, 200 minus 150, that'll... Okay, we can talk about it after. It's hard to, this is like trying to fix my mom's computer over the phone, Yes.
I just wanted make sure because there's like a lot of fat buttered up. So basically, we find the area of the consumer surplus with the area of the triangle, then the rectangle, right? And
Yes.
The number I got is 52,500.
That's the number.
And for the producer surplus, I got the area of the triangle is 2020. Wait. Yeah. So, and then so how do we get the dead weight? That one triangle area?
Oh, that's the difference between, so you really have to kind of, and I probably should have done it this way, you have to kind of start out by observing before the law is in place, the whole area would be this, right? At our market price of 200. You'd have consumer surplus up here, producer surplus down here, so you take that entire area, which turned out to be 80,000, right? And then you subtract the 75,000 that comprises this trapezoid here, which we computed piece by piece. Though someone noted you could also just compute this, the area of this darkly shaded triangle as well.
So wait, what's the point of isolating the consumer, the producer surplus?
In this case, the reason to do it was just to remind you. I was kind of doing a more expansive review to remind you how to calculate them, but also because you can sort of see why there's a deadweight loss, right? Because of these lost exchanges that otherwise would have occurred, right? Instead of 400, we have 300.
Yeah.
Last one, yes.
Wait. So once you get I added the two numbers up. Oh, wait, I think I'm getting it. So when you add the 50, and
yes,
then you'll get a certain number, and that's below the whole area calculation.
Yes, I think that sounds right. All right, I got to keep moving. One more question. We're still stuck on page 1 here. Yes?
Can we count that dark shaded?
That's the deadweight loss, the very dark shaded part there, right? That's what we've lost by putting the rent ceiling in place, right? Exchanges that no longer occur that used to occur before the law was put in place.
What would be the small uncolored triangle?
That's, you mean this one here? That really doesn't have any. Yeah, I mean, maybe you could say if you added those two triangles together and you were somehow able to satisfy the market demand, that would be surplus going to consumers. In fact, it's a neat question. And I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to anyway. After the exam, we're going to talk about how we can think about international trade problems using these diagrams, and we'll have a little interpretation that will involve some of these additional side triangles, if for want of a better term. Okay, I have to keep moving here. Let's go on to page 2. So here we have the demand for Chromebooks, right, in the town of Smallville, USA. And we see that the initial equilibrium is at a price of $200 and a quantity of 400. And so I say, well, what would happen if we put a $100 tax on Chromebooks? Now, by the way, this question is poorly conceived and executed by me, because even though we know it doesn't matter, right? I should have said whether or not the tax is on the suppliers, right? The people bringing the Chromebooks to Smallville, or if it's on consumers, right? That you pay this at the cash register, because that will matter how you solve the problem out, right? So I'll be a little bit more. The tax problems are always tough. So I'll try to be a little bit more detailed in doing everything step by step. Though I really do have to I have to kind of move a little bit faster than I have been. Yes?
Isn't there only one way we can place the tax on this picture?
So the question was, isn't there only one way we can place the tax on this picture? And the answer to that question is yes, too. So yes. I'm going to show you how it all works here. Let me just copy over my diagram. We have this here and here. We have 400, 200. Wait a minute. This Chromebook market looks a lot like the rent ceiling market, doesn't it? It's a little trick of it. If you're a professor and you draw these fancy diagrams on computer, you often want to use them more than once. So, there we go. Okay. So we're going to have to find the prices that consumers pay, producers get, how many Chromebooks are exchanged in the market, and what the amount of tax revenues are. Okay, so we'll get to all that shortly. Let me do my usual trick here. Oop, like that. Okay. So here's my depiction of the Chromebook market. Now, one thing that I maybe concealed or I should have made a little bit more clear before we did the last problem is that we usually want to start by figuring out what consumer surplus and producer surplus are before the tax is in place. I'll do that quickly. So this establishes for us a benchmark for things like deadweight loss. You don't really need it here, but I'll do it just to show you to be a little bit more complete with the whole process. So before we have the tax, 400, 200 times 400, this turns out to have an area of 40,000. Right? That shouldn't be a big surprise because it's kind of the same diagram as last time. And this thing down here has an area of 40,000. So put another way, consumer plus producer surplus prior to any tax in place gives us welfare of 80,000. Right? Total societal welfare of 80,000. 40,000 for each market segment. Now, what we have to do is we have a tax of $100, right? Put into this market. So maybe what I'll do is I'll start over. Keep in mind that $80,000 there. I'll start over, and I'll just redraw the diagram as quickly as possible here. I should always label my curves. I didn't do that on the previous. Okay, and now we want to think about what happens when we put a tax into place here of 100. So, if it's on consumers, right, that is to say something like you would understand a typical sales tax, we saw that what you could do is shift demand down by the amount of the tax, or shift demand back by the amount of the tax. This might give you something like, well, 400, maybe something like that, right? And then you could say, all right, well, this is our new equilibrium here and here, right? I believe this would work out to be 150, and this would be 300. This is 400. That would be one way to do it, right? I should have been clear whether or not I wanted you to think about it as a sales tax or as a tax on producers. If it were a tax on producers, what you would do is you would shift this curve, the supply curve, up by the amount of the tax, right? So just trying to rig this so it works out. That's pretty good. Should be a parallel shift here. In which case we would find that this number, something like 250, and again we have this 300 here. Now, there was a question about this, which was something to the effect of, it doesn't really matter which you do, right? There's only one point that actually works in the market, and the whole thing now is to or the way to see it this way, to sort of step back and view the big picture here, is to think just about a tax wedge, right? We have this tax of $100. What that means is we have to wedge $100 between the price that consumers get and the price that consumers pay and the price that suppliers get, right? We got to wedge it in there, and we just have to think about which quantity exchanged in the market satisfies that criterion, right? That it gives us a $100 difference. And so you can kind of see that I've done it so that this distance here is $100, right? And so maybe I can just quickly look at I can quickly look at my exam again. I really got to keep moving here. And you can kind of think about the thought experiment as one where we kind of go like this, right? You sort of say, okay, well, let's find this tax wedge, or where the tax wedge lands, by just moving back, right? Watching steadily as our demand and supply grow further and further apart. Let's move back. Oh, all of a sudden they're 100 units apart. That's where we stop. So now we see that the market quantity is 300. Producers get 150 in effect, right? Consumers pay 250, the difference being the tax, right? So that's kind of how I would expect you to think about this particular problem. Now, one last thing here. You can see kind of where all the numbers fall into place here. you can see that quantity demanded and supplied after the tax is 300. I believe there was a question on that. The price producers pay is 150. The price producers get, I should say, and the price consumers pay is 250. Difference being the tax. The tax revenue then is just this difference here, right? Why is that the case? Well, the tax is $100. There are 300 units traded in the market, so it's a simple rectangular calculation here, right? 300 times 100 gives you 30,000 in tax revenue, right? Now, if you wanted to, we could talk all day about this diagram, or all class about this diagram, but you could then also sort of figure out societal welfare here by taking consumer surplus to be this thing up here, producer surplus to be this thing down here, and then we typically add in the tax revenue for reasons we described last time, right? We add in the tax revenue when we think about total societal welfare because we could spend it on something beneficial. That still leaves us with a deadweight loss due to taxation here, right? Trades that don't happen anymore after the tax that previously were happening. So you can figure that out by the usual means. 100 is the base of that triangle. It's 100 units tall, right? If you view it from this angle, divide that by 2, you get 5,000, and it's exactly like we'd found in the previous. Okay, so that's kind of the whole problem there, and I think that brings us to the end of the in-class practice exam. So you'll see it took me about 30 minutes to get through that. And I did some twists and turns and all of that stuff. So you should have plenty of time to do it if you know kind of what you're doing. And you might even have time to do some of these things in various different ways. I'm all for it, right? If you have means of checking your work and verifying you got the right answer. Right? Once again, I'm not trying to, this isn't a mystery here. I'm not trying to have you figure out any secrets or to taking the exam. We're trying to just ask about the material here. Yeah?
I have a couple questions on the answer. So it's number 7, 300, and then 850.
Yeah, let me reiterate that. So, number 7, we would say 300. Number 8, it would be 250. Number 9 would be 150. And then the tax revenue would be 30,000. So we figured out? Yeah. And of course, one last thing. I got to keep moving here, but one last thing I'd like to just remind you of is even though my question could have been better, right? It could have specified who the tax was being paid by nominally. It doesn't matter, right? You should be able to figure out without. Okay, let's move on to the in-class component because I want to make sure I have enough. I want to be able to do all the problems, but I also wanted to pause and just kind of show you something from problem set 1. It's a little bit of a break here halfway between. So this is always fun to me to look at these maps, and it's one of the great things about Hunter College here. So this question is, where were you born on right, where you're supposed to click on this map of the world, and you can see here you're a pretty diverse group, right? Pretty good coverage of the globe here. If we click on all of the places people were born, people born in Alaska, it's kind of neat, right? Even more interesting, let's look at where your parents were born, right? And now you get you almost blot out the entire world. So that to me is kind of neat and exciting. I'm wondering where that is, but Okay. All right. I just wanted to show you that. That's kind of fun. All right. Let's now look at the in-class component, and we can maybe move a little bit faster. The online component. We can move a little bit faster here. So, scarcity exists because of, the classic answer here is not, the market mechanism is a way of dealing with scarcity, right? As are specialization and the division of labor. C is kind of the market again. D is really the reason, right? People always want more of stuff and we can't do everything, right? So I would think of that as the correct answer, and it looks like most people who did the practice exam indeed got that correct. So, yes?
Are you going to be able to check the online component like today? Before the test, will you release it?
Yeah, I thought I did. Didn't I hand it back? I thought I handed it back first thing this morning.
Okay, but I didn't see it.
Okay, yeah, and you should be able, I should have said that actually. You should be able to see this, and you should have access to this up until the, and beyond the exam. Yeah?
Does this affect our grade?
No. None of this, you didn't have to do any of this, and you can sit here and just enjoy the presentation, that's fine. It was strictly so you kind of got some practice and know what's coming. Okay, so this is a great question. If I didn't have, I had a lot of questions about things like this. If I didn't have class tonight, I would save the $4 campus parking fee and spend 4 hours at work where I earn $10 per hour. The opportunity cost of attending class this evening is, okay, so what I had a lot of questions about these over the week during office hours, and I boiled down in the following way of thinking about opportunity costs for the purposes of this class. It's actually even more complex than I'm about to say, for reasons that are kind of interesting. So think about it this way. When you do something, right, you give up really two things almost every time you decide to do an activity. You give up the time you could have spent doing something else, and you give up the money you pay for the activity, right? Time and money. Well, we want to be able to add all these together in one measure of costs, so we then say, well, how valuable was your time, right? What is the dollar value of your time? And, well, then we can just add it to the dollar value of the money you spent, which you presumably could have spent on something else. Well, a parking fee is a great example. You could have went and, to McDonald's or whatever. So the answer should be, let's see, 4 hours of working would give you $40, plus the $4 that you spent on parking, you could have spent that on something else. So you give up $44 in total value, time value plus money when you go to class, right? So D is the best answer there. And okay, you can see it's a little tricky. These opportunity costs are a little tricky. Time and money, right? We'll think a lot about opportunity costs in a deeper fashion than that. And actually later in the semester, we have a great discussion about falling fertility rates around the world and the opportunity costs of having children, right? That's going to be a very interesting discussion. Anyway. But time and money, think about it that way for now. Time value, I should say, in money. Money given up. The choice on a production possibilities set that is socially preferred, or the choice on an individual's budget constraint that is personally preferred. I don't love this question because we didn't talk a lot about that last statement. We'll display allocative efficiency, the production possibilities frontier. We're talking about a point. Allocative efficiency is getting goods to people who value them the most. A and B are a little weird. D is scarcity. Well, that's true, but I think C is the best answer, right? When you pick a point on the frontier, which is what people should do, societies, people, whatever, there should always be trade-offs, right? So I think I guess I got that one. I got that one wrong, right? Allocative efficiency. Okay. So really, what I'm saying here is that the best point of the points that are possible should be the one that you think satisfies your wants. Don't love that question. People tended to get it right. I don't think I would put one like that on the exam. Weird. If the price is $8 per unit, quantity supplied will equal. Well, this is a pretty simple exercise in just reading off a supply curve, right? Here we have a diagram of a supply curve. So $8, let's see, we read the point off, 40, that should be D. Now this is pretty simple, so I'd be surprised if D. Okay, everybody got that right, except for a couple people. Sometimes I think people randomize on the practice exam, which is, that's fine. Just try to see what the answers look like as you move along. So this is a tough one. I had some questions about this one too, or problems like this. The question there, we have a supply curve, and the question is, if quantity supplied increases from 10 to 20 units, the producer's total costs will increase by what? Okay, so here, this is tough because you have to have a detailed understanding of the idea that supply reflects marginal costs, right? Supply and marginal costs are kind of the same thing. And so now we're asking about total costs. I wish that it didn't say producers like that. I wish it was producers with an apostrophe after the S, not before, because it's everybody in the market. But let me just go to the diagram. I'll draw out the diagram here, and we'll do it that way. So, oh, good. So here we have. $10, $20, $30, $40. There's supply, here's quantity and price, and 10 to 20. Okay. So if we read the question carefully, you'll hopefully remember that it is about how the costs change as we go from 10 to 20, right? So the insight that you need to think about is that supply equals marginal cost, and that is to say that each unit, right, the supply traces out the costs effectively of each unit produced. So as a consequence of this, as we've previously discussed, the area under supply, right, captures the costs of producing, say, these first 10 units. So once again, it's a triangle, 2 times 10. If we look at these first 10 units then, 2 times 10 is 20 divided by 2. This area should be 10, right? Well, if we were to instead produce 20, the triangle that we would be worried about would be calculating this whole area, right? Same principle. If we go up to 20 units, well, the cost of producing additional units, given we've already produced some, goes up to 20 for the very last one. This whole triangle here has area 20 times 4 is 80 divided by 2 is 40, right? Now the question was about the difference. Right? The difference, pretty subtle there, or how costs change as we go from 10 to 20. And you can see here, since costs go from 10 to 40, the difference is 30, right? Which is that's a little tricky. I'm feeling like maybe that's a little too much. Too much deciphering what the question is, and then there's kind of a lot of nuances to calculate it. But that's what we're looking for, that area there. And of course, you could, if you appreciated the geometry there, you could calculate it directly. But still, that's a pretty tricky problem. I don't know if I'd put that on an exam. Sometimes it's harder to make a practice exam because I have to do it a week before. So there are these little things I would like to iron out. So 30 is indeed the right answer, and you can see here, this is, if I look at this answer profile after a question, I know it was really hard and perhaps borderline misleading for students because the majority of people got it wrong, right? Okay, so here's another. Fortunately, we have a toss-up question coming next. If the price of this good is $2 per unit, then what will be the quantity supplied? Well, you just have to read off the diagram there. At a price of 2, you can see that we have 1 unit supplied here. So let's see here, 1. And good, almost everybody got that right. Okay, so I always like to throw a question like number 7 onto the exam here. And it's, which of the following will not shift the market supply curve of good X? A change in the cost of inputs, that will shift the supply curve. A change in technology, that will also shift the supply curve. C, a change in the number of sellers of the good. Yes, that will shift it too. What doesn't shift the actual curve? A change in the price of the good, right? That's movement along the curve. This is the classic econ professor's trick question that appears on exams all over the world here. And so you can see here it was a little bit difficult. At what price will surplus equal $2? This is a tough one again because now there's really no way to do it unless you're very good at calculating areas visually. You kind of have to just go through each option and see where do you get a producer surplus of $2. So you have to kind of think about the area above supply but below whatever price it is you're thinking about. So maybe I can do this again. Let's see, we start at 1. Go like this. We have 1, 2. I've tried to do that. The question was, why don't I just draw on the diagram like this? Because it's really hard to see. It's much harder than it looks, right? I've tried to do that before. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's see. We're trying to get a surplus equal to 2. We'll stop as soon as we get it. That's my plan. All right, so let's see here. First triangle here, let's see, is at a price of 2. Or a price of 1, it's 0, so that doesn't, there's no supply really. At a price of 2, you can see this distance is 1, this distance is 1. So 1 times 1 is 1, divided by 2 would be 0.5, right? So that's not the answer that we're looking for. Let's see, at a price of 3, we have this distance is 2. This distance is 2. 2 times 2 is 4, divided by 2 is 2, right? So this whole triangle here, in fact, has an area of 2. And luckily, we're done, right? We found the right answer. You might want to keep going and check the rest of them, because you probably have plenty of time to do so. But unfortunately, we do not have plenty of time to do so in the review here. So it was at a price of $3, right? There we go. Okay, and most people got that right. A decrease in supply is graphically represented by a leftward shift in the supply curve, right? A leftward shift in the supply curve. A rightward shift, a movement up and to the right, a movement down to the left. Well, typically, when we think about supply changing, what we have in mind is the curve changing. So C and D are not correct. And if supply decreases, we would imagine that the supply curve shifts back, right? So luckily I have a diagram here where that kind of happens, right? Here we shift the supply curve back. And one way of thinking about what this means is that now we have less quantity supplied at any given price than we did before, right? So that answer should be A, leftward shift, right? And there we go. Okay, most people got it right. If supply is S1, which area represents market surplus? Looking at this question, I probably would have liked to be more, exact in what I'm asking for. So I might have said market surplus, that is consumer plus producer surplus. Right, and that's kind of what I had in mind here. And if it is S1, that's this curve. The two triangles, you can, in your mind's eye, imagine a price here, producer plus consumer surplus. So the answer should just be A. And okay, so that was tricky, right? Tricky question. Question 11, not so tricky. If the price of this good is $1, what will be the quantity demanded? Right? And this is a little bit of a toss-up for you. Just exercise and reading off the curve here. $1, 15, right, is the number for quantity demanded. So it is C, and most people were able to get that right. There's always a lot of A's just because some people are clicking through to just look at the questions. Okay, another tough one. Right up there with the changing costs question. This one is pretty tough. It says, what are the total benefits to this individual if she consumes 10 units of the good? And I guess the presumption is that this is that individual's demand curve. So what I would do, or what I had in mind you would do, is kind of think a little bit about the geometry of this diagram. And I had a couple of discussions with students over the week about some of the components here. So I'm just going to copy it over. This is 10. This is 2. And this is 4. And I do say 10, right? Okay. So I kind of copied over the most important features of the diagram here. So let me just go over this. This marker isn't so good. Think about the various surpluses and things that we have talked about as they pertain to this demand curve here, right? So we saw that demand traces out value or the benefits, the marginal benefits that you get from each unit of consumption, right? So technically speaking, this means that the first unit consumed produces benefits of 4, right? The second unit, maybe it's something like, 3.8 or something, I don't know what the exact number is, but because of this idea of diminishing marginal benefits, diminishing marginal utility, they go down until you hit the market point, but it is this entire vertical distance that captures the total benefits. This is distinct from the surplus, right? That you would get if you bought the product in the market. This question isn't about that. You buy the product in the market, typically, well, at 10 units you would pay, this is the demand curve. If you paid a price of $2, that would mean that you're getting $4 in total benefits and giving up $2 to get those $4. So that's where we get the surplus from, right? So I had a student say to me, well, then you can say total benefits is expenditures, $2 times 10, right, plus surplus. And I guess you could say that mechanically, but what I would say is that net benefits, right, at a market price are different than total benefits, and net benefits align with the concept of consumer surplus. Anyways, I can't go on forever about that, but this area here then would be the total benefits, the total area underneath demand, and you can see here this triangle here is 2 times 10 is 20. That gives us this top part with an area of 10. We want to add to that this rectangle. 2 times 10 is 20. So this total area should be 30, right? And hopefully that's the correct answer here. All the way back to the... We're doing pretty well. 30. And see, that was a toughie. Tough question. I don't know if I would want to put one like that on the exam. It's a lot of nuance there that... Okay. Which of the following will result in a decrease in demand, right? So here I say a leftward shift of the demand. So this might be one of those things where you give away an answer to a different question while you're asking a question. So maybe, I think we had one about shifting supply. Anyways, what will decrease demand? Well, let's see. An increase in income if the good is normal. Well, that should increase demand, right? Shift out the demand curve. A decrease in the price of a complement. Ooh, that's tricky. So let's see, if the price of a complement good goes down, how does my demand for a good change? So I always like to go with consoles and games. So if a PlayStation becomes cheaper, my demand for games shifts out. So B shifts out the demand, not leftward. An increase in the price of a substitute. Well, let's see. If the price of pears goes up, how does my demand for apples change? Well, it increases, right? So all of these things shift the demand curve out, not leftward, right, or back. So D is the right answer, and okay, most people got that right. Okay, suppose my daily marginal benefit from drinking coffee increases by $2 per cup. Which of the following represents the effect of this on my coffee demand curve? Okay, well, if every marginal benefit increases by $2, that should shift the curve out, and it should shift it out in parallel to where it was previously, right? So this is a little bit like a tax in reverse. Or maybe that's, if you want to think about how a subsidy would work, that's kind of what would happen, right? You get an additional $2 every time you drink a cup of coffee. So that would be this picture down here, D, right? The parallel shift of an amount equal to $2 there. So that should be D, I said. Okay, most people got it right. I did it reverse there. There we go. So here we have demand curves for coconuts in question 15. I got to keep moving quickly here. Suppose that coconuts and pineapples are substitutes. if the price of pineapples increases, which of the following movements will represent the effect of this in the market for coconuts? Okay, so we kind of have to go through the list because it plausibly could be more than one of these, right? Because the arrows are bidirectional there. But you would expect that it would be A to C or E to B because they're substitutes. Pineapples get more expensive, people buy more coconuts. A to C, that works. That's a shift out. A to B, that's a movement along the curve, right? B to A, well, that's kind of a movement in the opposite direction along the curve. B to E, that's a shift back. So A is really the only one that fits the bill here. And most people got it right, but not everyone. So this is a little tricky, right? Consider the diagram below, because in this example we have a perfectly vertical or a perfectly inelastic supply curve. I don't know if I'd want to trick you like that on an exam, right? We can still just kind of answer it in the usual way we would. Which area represents consumer surplus? Well, let's see. The market price is the dashed line going to the point where S and D cross. And then, as usual, consumer surplus is everything below demand but above the market price, right? So that would mean that we would want to add W and Y together, and that would give us D, right, as the answer to So most people got it right, and that is the right answer. At a price of $8, question 17 begins. There is what? Okay, well, I can go to put the diagram a little bit lower here, and I can see it at a price of 8, we see that demand is here and supply is here. So we can see that there looks like from 15 to 40, a 25 unit surplus of the good, right? A 25 unit surplus. That's the distance from 40, which is supplied, and 15, which is demanded. So this would be excess supply, a surplus of not 15 but 25 units. I feel like I went heavy on the D option here in this practice exam. Okay, so most people but not everyone got that right. Tougher question. Okay, we're looking at this diagram below, right? At the equilibrium price in this market, looks like that's 4. Consumer surplus is equal to area what? And producer surplus is equal to area what? So once again, consumer surplus, below demand, above price. That's A. Producer surplus, above supply, below market price. That looks like B plus C, right? So let's see, A, I guess you could start this way. Which ones correctly identify consumer surplus? Just B, right? B is the only one that has consumer surplus as A correct. I kind of am not in love with this. It's a little hard to read. Mental note to self. But the correct answer is in fact B. Right? So, correct answer, responses. There we go. Oh, most people got it. That's good. Consider the market for oranges. Suppose that we have two things happening at the same time. The price of apples decreases, right? And worldwide droughts reduce the harvest of oranges by 30%. What do we expect in the market for oranges? Okay, well, we see here we have various options that talk about what happens to price and quantity. So, this question has some nuance to it, so I can take a little bit of extra time with it. Let's see. Price of apples falls, worldwide drought. Just got to remember my details here. All right. Go to the drawing board. We'll start off quantity, price, demand, supply. Okay, a price of a substitute decreases. Well, that makes you more likely to buy the substitute vis-a-vis the product. So that should shift demand back, right? And now we also have a worldwide crunch, right, in the supply, right? Or what was the scenario again? How do I forget this? Oh, it was just a drop in the worldwide supply. So I guess obviously that should shift supply back. So we see here that what will happen is our quantity will fall. We know that. What happens to price? We can't be so sure. It depends upon the relative strength of the shifts, right? If I drew a very dramatic supply shift, well, that could increase the price. If it wasn't as dramatic as, it could decrease the price. So I might say price ambiguous. The impact on price is ambiguous, but we know quantity is going down, right? So go back to this again. So price could either, okay, so A looks right. Price could change, however, right? But we know quantity will decrease. Okay, tough. Those are tough. Okay. So first of all of these questions are about price P3, right? So maybe I'll jump right to thinking about that price. And I'm just going to look at I'm going to figure out what the answer is and then go down the list here. Was there a question? So at price P3, I'm looking at quantity demanded as Q3, quantity supplied as Q1. So there's an excess demand, which is the same as the distance DE. We might say there's a shortage, right? And I probably should have added that into the answer. So at a price of P3, there is an excess demand equal to the distance D to E. Well, we can check the other ones. B to E, that doesn't really have anything to do with, that's kind of just interference, right? Excess supply BE, well, that's weird. There is excess supply equal to DE. So none of those are any good except for A, right? Is every answer either D or A here? At a price ceiling of P3 causes, let's see here. A price ceiling of P3, it's effective. It's below the equilibrium that would have occurred, which is at C. So every one of these is about the deadweight loss triangle. And so we hopefully know that the deadweight loss triangle here consists of points A, C, and D, right? A, C, and D are the 3 points that go there. So A, B, C, that's not right. A, C, D, that could be right. B, E, C, no. C, D, E, no. So it does look like, so we are on this A, C, D as the right answer, and okay, most people got that right. We're getting there. Consider the diagram below. Little typo there. Consider the diagram below. Market for low-skilled labor. If we introduce a minimum wage at $9 per hour, which of the following statements is true? Okay, so let's see here what we have for true statements. At $9 an hour, let's see. There will be 11,000 workers willing to work who cannot find work given the wage. Okay, so, well, does that make sense? Let's see here. At $9 an hour, we have 4,000 is the demand, 15,000 is the supply. So it looks like that is correct. One works. The number of workers employed will decrease by 11,000. No, and one of the things I like about this question is it kind of points out the difference between, the surplus labor created and the market outcome. So if you think about the world before the equilibrium, or before the minimum wage and after it, we start here and then go to here, right? So we'll observe in the market that 5,000 jobs will be lost. Right? That would be the observable decrease, which is different than the surplus. So 2 is not true. 3, the number of workers that employers are prepared to hire will decrease by 5,000. That seems to be true also, right? It's kind of the same thing here. So I would say 1 and 3. D, once again, big mystery, right? That D is A and D are the answers, right? I think I'm going to make it here. We'll see here. Coffee grows best in a somewhat dry environment. Given that, what would be the effects of unusually heavy summer rains in Colombia on the market for coffee? So we start at E0, and with price P0 and Q0, point your mouse and click on the new equilibrium intersection, equilibrium price, and equilibrium quantity. Okay, so unusually heavy summer rains would mean that would impact the supply adversely, right? So we're kind of looking for a supply backwards. So what I had in mind is that you would start here at this point and then move to this point. Now, as I'm looking at this, I can see that I've had experience with this in the past. This generates a lot of confusion, and I should only have you click on one point if I'm going to click on something. So that's kind of what I had in mind, is that you would click on this point. But the way I asked the question makes it seem like you should click on the axes as well. So I would have to be, I would clean this up a lot if I were to put one like this on the exam. So you can see what the answer looks like, if nothing else. It means you have to get a click in the target zone, right? Okay, so almost everybody clicked on the actual diagram, and you can see the clicks are thickest here. Some people shifted back demand, but that was and some people shifted both curves. Some people just clicked in off the chart entirely. But yes, question?
Oh, no, I thought, yeah, all good. I thought the demand, okay, demand does not change. Right.
No, it's about supply, yeah.
Yeah.
Tough one. Okay. Now, what would be the effects of unusually heavy summer rains in Colombia on the market for coffee? So this is kind of what it looks like here. You would say demand would not change, supply would decrease. We would say price should go up, and price should decrease and quantity should decrease, right? So let's see here, show premise. I think I got all that right. And then the responses are a little bit, yeah, okay. That's a little bit harder for you to see here, what the answer is. The market for coffee begins question 25. In the 90s, preference for coffee changed. Coffee became a more mainstream drink, right? And at the same time, Vietnam entered the market. Okay, so what you're supposed to do is click on the right point on both of these after this change here. So what do we have going on here? Supply increasing, right, due to Vietnam becoming a player in the industry, and demand increasing. So what we kind of want to do is shift both of these curves. So shift out supply, shift out demand. That should put us here. And shift out demand, shift out supply. That should put us here, right? So you can see the target once again. And okay, we got a pretty good variety of responses there. But that's kind of what we had in mind there. Click on that intersection. All right. Here the market for coffee, big component of the exam. What is the effect of this on equilibrium price and quantity? Well, the nice thing is you can use your previous answer to figure out this one. You can see here that, well, we know quantity is going to increase, right? We don't know what's going to happen to price. Is it going to go up or not? So equilibrium price can't be predicted. Equilibrium quantity we know should increase. So there we go. And okay, not everybody, the price one kind of confused people a bit. Market equilibrium, what is consumer surplus? Well, that's here, right? I'll do it. We see the triangle will have if we turn this way, we'll have a height of 6. And the area below demand going to that price of 4, well, that's distance traversed is 4. So we have 6 times 4 is 24. Divided by 2 is 12, right? There's the right answer. And we got a lot of crazy answers, or some good probably, but most people got the right answer. Per unit tax is placed on the good equal to 4. Okay, so once again, when I'm going to ask a task, I'm sorry, I'm moving a little fast here. If I'm going to ask a tax question, I should be clear who is bearing the tax, even though you know it doesn't matter, right? So with that in mind, let's use the wedge method, and I will start here. It's $4, right? So we're looking for a quantity where our two curves are $4 apart, right? And if you kind of just look at them mechanically, luckily I happened to settle on a question that picked out a exact whole number here. So it looks like at a quantity of 3, we have a price that producers get of 2 and a price consumers pay of 6, right? So the equilibrium quantity should be 3. There it is. And a bit of a struggle for people. Okay, supply and demand. $4. How much revenue is collected? Okay, so note to self, Baker, this one you could have a kind of error carried over. By the way, let me seize this opportunity to say that you will have chances to look at the way your exam is graded and criticize it, respond to it, say, well, I got this wrong, but Baker, this is what I was thinking. Stuff like that, right? You will have a chance to assess your exam. So anyways, we just saw a tax of $4 per unit. 3 units were exchanged in the market. So to get the tax revenue, 3 times 4 is 12, right? 3 units times a $4 tax. Maybe you can picture the rectangle there in the middle of the supply and demand diagram. 12 is the answer. And once again, a tougher question for people. 3 more questions. Okay, Mars colony. Ooh. The PPF shows habitats and spacecraft. If we're producing 3 spacecraft and 8 habitats, but want to produce an additional spacecraft, what is the opportunity in terms of habitats? So you can see here, we're at 3 spacecraft and 8 habitats. If we want one more spacecraft, we go to 4, and that drops us to 6 habitats. So we would say the opportunity cost of a spacecraft at this point is 2 habitats, right? There we go. Oh, okay. I'm happy to see that. Most people got that right. Suppose we have nothing but spacecraft, right? It is decided, however, that spacecraft production should be reduced by 1 so that more habitats may be produced. How many habitats can then be produced if 1 spacecraft is foregone? Well, you can see here, we go from 0.5 to 4, 6 here, so the answer should be 6, right? Given everything is about spacecrafts, it's pretty easy to produce habitats, and so 6 is the answer there. Looks like we're making it to the last question here in exactly the right amount of time. Here we go, the PPF, which is inefficient. Okay, so let's see. 5 spacecraft, 0 habitats, that's on the curve. It's efficient, right? Maybe I should take this opportunity to remind you that any point along the curve is efficient. Points inside the curve are not. 3.8 is on the curve. 1.9, where's that? 1.9, ooh, inside the curve, inefficient, right? 5.1, by the way, is unattainable. So the correct answer is C. And most people got that right as well. Okay, I see you're getting restless, as often happens towards the end of class. So I will wrap it up there, and I will see you Monday for the exam.